doing it live.
We're doing it live.
We're
Let's
doing
go,
it live.
baby.
Hello, my little fellas. This is the Rare Hunter back again with my friend Kenny, my best friend Kenny.
True teammates, travel partners.
You did something over the weekend, right?
Yeah, I sure did. I was lucky enough to top 32 the BSS launch event. I feel really good about it. Rare Hunter and I put a lot of work into testing, and then we threw all that out the window basically every week that we tested, because we learned something new that was just like completely game changing. I will say, just as far as the card game goes, I've been really impressed with it because just baseline it looks like a Japanese big number battler. But there's actually an insane amount of depth to this game, and as we tested and we were just kind of like buying into the Ponzi scheme of the tournament, BSS, don't watch this video.
Sorry, Bandai.
We walked away from most testing nights going, I kind of had fun. Like, I could kind of jam more games right now.
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty interesting topic. Originally, we were going to do a deck tech, but now we're in this podcast mode.
Yeah.
How do you, coming from Flesh and Blood and Magic, how are you enjoying Battle of Spirit Saga?
I think it's good. I think the game gives you a lot of control over resources, just because I'm hoping those watching know how the resource system works. Your life basically becomes mana. When you take a damage, you ramp at growth. And throughout the tournament, throughout testing, it was very, very like ceiling level thinking of, they're attacking me, how am I going to block, how am I going to take this damage, what does taking damage let me do over the course of the next few turns, does it let me win the game, if I'm on an aggressive deck, does going down to 1 mean that I just killed them on the crackback, if I attack them this turn instead of building up to Oko them, what can they do with that mana and subsequently. So it's a very, I felt like a razor line all weekend, especially playing a control deck, because spoiler alert, I played Elk Control. Just really balancing that mana and knowing what you're playing around.
All right, well, let's just look at your deck and see, anything special that you brought.
Yeah, I played Yu-Gi-Oh, but I didn't really do deck techs for it, so I'm just going to try to mimic all the deck techs that I've watched in my life.
Oh, perfect. This is exactly what we're trying to do.
So first off, star of the show is the Elk, Divine Moonsky Beast.
Fanatic Elk?
Fanatic Elk? Is it? Fanatec.
Yeah.
It's Fanatec.
Yeah.
That's crazy, because he's a machine. Anyway, yes. I think every single person that I played against all had their own unique nickname for whatever cards they were playing.
Oh, yeah?
Because the downside of this game is the names are just awful. They're god-awful. Writing them down is awful. Trying to remember them is awful. So, like, everyone just calls this guy Elk or just, like, Moose or something like that. Like, half the robots in the game I just call Gundam, but people know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so start of the show, Elk. This is basically the main game plan of your deck. For those that don't know, his level 2 and level 3 effect, at the end of your opponent's turn, if they have not hit you, they lose a life. This is really insane for a lot of reasons. Mainly because it's very easy to not get hit in the game with how some of the rules interaction works. And we'll get to that a little later on. I guess we can just cover it now.
New ruling that was announced pretty much right before the tournament, like a few days.
Well, there was the Q&A ruling that made this deck insane, and then there was the new ruling that made this deck slightly less insane. But this is hands down the best card in the game, Absolute Ice Shield. Thank you to Wes for lending me his 4 for the video. Mine are in another deck already, because I'm already building other decks for this game. I'm very excited to play it. But Absolute Ice Shield is insane. If you set it down as your trap card, burst card, and you take a damage, you reveal it, rewind time, life goes back, and then you can pay the 4 extra mana to end the combat. But the insane ruling that came out with the Q&A, I think it was like a week or two before the tournament, was that if you refund the life from Ice Shield and then end combat, with how Elk is worded, because you technically didn't lose life at the end of the turn because the game sees your life being the same as when the turn started, his effect will trigger.
Yeah.
So this was the game plan of the deck. You land an Elk, hopefully 2 Elks. You put yourself in a position where you maybe chunked them for 1 or 2 early, and then you just sit there. And then you Ice Shield, and they're frustrated, and they take 2, they take 1, and then they die. And there's not really anything they can do to get around it except for their own Ice Shield, because when they lose life from Elk, they can burst this to gain 1 life back, but it's just a losing battle. The deck also felt really insane just because this is your main game plan, but a lot of your creatures that you get into, or that we'll get into, that are your early plays, because they're very defensively statted, can just hit your opponent. So I found a lot of games where my opponent was trying to play around the elk, so to speak, like they were trying to go wide or chip in damage when they could, and then when they chipped in damage, it gave me enough mana to just play like a bunch of small defensive guys and kill them.
Okay.
But yeah, so this is the core game plan of the deck. This is like what you want to do. To help with that, we were also playing, Wes and I played basically the same deck. I think it was a 3-card difference. We'll cover that one and talk about how I felt about the card that I did decide to play.
He felt cheated, that's what it is.
I felt cheated, but I did better, so I don't know what that means.
Nobody wants to know how the Rare Hunter did.
Right. So this is, I think, probably the third best card in the deck. The next card I originally thought was the third best, but I think this won me more games than the other card, hands down. This guy has protection, which means he can't be targeted by red, purple, or white creature effects, magic cards, trap cards. So when he comes down, he's just untouchable and big, which is kind of where you want to be when you're a control deck in this format. You want to be able to block effectively and not have them kill it with like a volcanic break or bounce it with a dream bomb. But he gets even better because once you get him to 4, he gives that same protection to all of your spirits. As well, he also untaps 1 time when he blocks. This guy is just insane. Having your board completely protected, especially Elk, gave you so much wiggle room on how loose you wanted to play the game. And it also gave you a board that most decks just can't swing through. I think the addition of 3 of this card in the main board made the red matchup borderline unlosable, just because it's impossible for them to interact with you and it's very tough for them to get over you. Like pure Nova builds lost hands down just because of this card. The Terra builds could get under you. I think that happened to you a couple times.
Actually, yes. And then the second time I played against Nova, I actually lost this because Majin Bey, if you guys know him, he attacked me with a Confront Dragon while I had this, but I was very behind, so he was level 2, 9,000, and with the Confront Dragon and a Nexus that pumped it to 10k, it just like, this was my only spirit on board, and so I had to block with it.
Yeah.
But it was one of those situations where we both knew that it was like, my hand must have been so awkward and bad for that to be.
And my matchup against Pterosaur, I think I only played against one, was a little weird because he sideboarded into white to try to out-elk me.
That's interesting.
Which was interesting, but it didn't end up panning out, but it spooked me. It certainly spooked me.
All right.
But there are situations with this guy in the Tyranna build where, because of Giganorex, they can get over him, but if you play like 1 suppression and blow him out, like the game's over. So I think this card is a mainstay. I don't think 4 is the right number, but I think 3 is like super great.
Definitely lost the games I lost were because I drew too many of these guys.
Yeah, and you just couldn't do anything with them. And then the last part of like the control board or game plan are the 4. I called him Mammoth Graveyard, and I also just called the Nexus Mammoth Graveyard. I refuse to learn their names. That's how dedicated I am to this game, but I do love it. So essentially, this was the high roll. We agreed before the weekend that this was the high roll that we wanted to play in our control deck. Basically, the meme is that if you go first, you can play this for your 4 mana. So you have no mana open. That's great. Kind of sucks, whatever. But this reduces the cost of your machine beasts that cost 6 or more. Well, it doesn't reduce the cost. It gives you basically devotion for 3 for Magic players, or it gives a 3 cost reduction by itself.
This is not a machine beast.
This is not a machine beast. We thought it was like
when we first started testing.
Like the first or second week of testing when we didn't know what any of the cards said, and we were like, this deck's insane. It's the best. But the neat thing is, if you play this on turn 1, if they don't hit you, you have 5 mana on turn 2, which is exactly enough to play and sustain your Elk, which is insane. Because getting an early Elk in a lot of matchups is very powerful, because the following turn you can just dump all of your cores into it, and then it's basically unkillable. Like, red just can't deal with that.
Going second, you could just play this.
And going second, you can play this. And as well, if you play this on 1 and they hit you for 1 on 2, which did happen a lot, it gives you enough mana to play this. The Mammoth is absolutely bananas. He is a pretty big core of the control. I would say like these 3 cards are like your creature pillars. If you can set up 3 of these, even just 1 of each, it's kind of like the Holy Trinity, and it's really hard for decks to beat. What he does is just like a great death trigger. If they do manage to kill him, which is really tough, you draw 3 cards and you ram 3 mana, which is insane. That puts you so far ahead. But once you get him to level 2, which is 4 cores, it gives you a second refresh step. What that lets you do is play your cards, go to combat with your defensive creatures, which are all bigger than your opponents, because that's how you're trying to win the game. You want to block with bigger creatures, but it lets you swing with bigger creatures. They chump because they can't take the damage. Second refresh lets you untap them, so you get to attack and block. And it puts your opponent in basically an abyss situation where they have to manage their resources enough to be able to defend your big guys, but also have a big enough board to try to swing in to hit elk. And I would say that this Holy Trinity is what won me most of my games over the weekend. But we do have a smaller creature package that did also win a few games. So I guess this is kind of like a hybrid build, just because we are playing more of the low to the ground guys. But a lot of the changes that we made that I'll get into were basically the night before the tournament.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the last part of the defensive core, this was also a night before the tournament edition, is Dual Gun, Mechalord, Dermdyna. I kind of remember that name. I call him Gundam. Everything's a Gundam.
He played it because he has a shiny one.
I played it because I had the very cool, what are these, Saga X-Rare. But this card was also insane all weekend. Basically, when you go to combat and you swing, you can pay Soul Core, and then for each Nexus you or your opponent controls, that amount of white creatures are unblockable until end of turn. What this allowed me to do was basically break the white mirror, because they've set up Elk, they've set up this, they've set up their Mammoth. They're like, okay, hit me. This guy hits them. It gets through basically everything in the game, and especially if you have Armor Dragon, there's nothing that can stop this attack. So you hit them, poke them for 1, they don't get their trigger. If they don't have Dermdyna, they can't swing through your board. You're winning the mirror every single time.
Another interesting thing we found in this is it basically in white or white purple type lists, you go down to 1 a lot.
Yes.
And this helps end the game very easily.
Yeah, I did have a few games. I think the one game I played against purple once during the tournament, which was very lucky. I think that's the worst matchup for the deck. I did end up losing it, but the one game I won was because I got them down to 1. I drew Dermdyna, played it, attacked. They didn't have an answer, and they died. So I thank him every day for the gifts he's given me.
All right.
But yeah, that's the control core. So the rest of the deck is your low to the ground defensive creatures and your interaction. As far as the creatures, I can't say enough about PEGACYON. I think this is probably it was probably my most underrated card going into the tournament, and it's probably one of, I think, just the best creatures in the game, period. The amount of utility that this card has, just from baseline having armor red and purple, it's very tough to kill and deal with. On top of that, very efficient stat to cost ratio, and even at level 2, 4,000 that early is really insane. 7,000 on turn 2 or 3 is unbelievable. And then his second ability is what you're here for. If he has a, what are they, soul cores? Or the red soul core.
Yes.
Even if he's tapped, he can just block anything with 2 or fewer cores. So this just stops aggressive decks like Tyranna, the Fabled Beast deck, the 2-drop aggro deck. It stops all of them dead in their tracks. You sit there, you have a 7,000 wall that most of their spells just can't interact with in any way, shape, or form, and you can block infinitely. So you put them in situations where instead of developing into going wide, they're developing into going tall with very poorly statted creatures, which plays perfectly into your game plan of playing even bigger creatures than they can. On top of that, just with how efficient he costs and his stats, I won a lot of games by just playing PEGACYON into another PEGACYON and another 3-drop and attacking. Yeah. And my opponent may have kept a hand that was more prepared for a longer control game, and they just got beat up. So this card is unbelievable. I think even if I'm not playing dedicated white decks, I'm probably going to be playing 2 or 3 of this card in my sideboard, regardless of what deck I'm playing.
Well, that's interesting.
I think this card just has so much utility and so much matchups. The next one, this card, I loved going into the tournament. After the tournament, I think I would cut him completely from the deck.
Really?
Yeah, I think Snowflaking is terrible. He's kind of like, he's similar to PEGACYON in the like okay stat to cost ratio. And his effects are good. But I think my main issue with this card is he's missing like a level 2 that kind of bridges these numbers. Because it was very hard to get him to level 4 and enact my game plan. And on top of that, his effect ended up not being relevant like in most of the matches. Because as we learned, the Tyranidex and a lot of the Star Dragon decks ended up cutting most of the confront guys, which I think was like our main worry going into the
It was
tournament.
actually like a pretty interesting meta shift where initially the confront was a way for red decks to answer white cards.
Yeah.
And then they cut them for the vanilla cards, which some of them had better stats. And if you're just aggroing the white deck, the white deck can't block efficiently, which is how I lost one of my matches on camera. You guys might be able to see that on YouTube whenever BSS uploads it.
Yeah, I think they're planning on doing everything this week, so it should be soon.
Yeah.
But
so he sucks.
Yeah, he sucks. He's awful. I hated him every time I played him. He was awful. That's not entirely true. Armor Red is fine, and also like he's got the 2 reduction, so he fits into like the game plans when you're just playing a bunch of cheap white guys and trying to get in the final bits of damage if you're not elking. But I think there are better ones. Honestly, I think instead of Snowflake, and I'd probably play what is it, Bullet Ray Bill or
Bullet Ray. Yeah. I was gonna play Bullet Ray. My change would have been to cut the Hyrule City for Bullet Rays, because my thought was that the Hyrule was kind of for like the aggressive, like we need to win, and so Bullet Ray kind of like can gum up the ground for some of the early game stuff so that you can get to your late game. So that's kind of like what I was thinking, but
I think I'd probably keep Hyrule City just because like it filled its job all weekend. When I played it on 1 and I had Machine Beast to play after, like I never lost those games. It was never close.
They always complain.
Yeah, they triggered. Truly. But yeah, this guy just like stat-wise not good. Like maybe in the sideboard if the meta shifts back, but just not interested as of now. This card was phenomenal. This was a night before edition because we tested out a more tempo version that our good buddy Spencer actually top 4'd with. And while we were playing that, we were like, this card is unreal. I don't like the tempo deck, but this card's unreal. It's just 4 mana, bounce a guy that costs 7 or less, which is great.
Actually, this is basically just 1 mana, or a 1+1.
Exactly.
A lot of times.
I think what we kind of missed when looking
found
at this card, because
testing.
we talked about this during testing, but we ended up not pulling the trigger the week before. We were like, I think that's something like we may look into. But I think like the main thing I missed is like, because we knew the reduction, we knew bouncing was good. And I think we both kind of had the experience from Kaijudo Duel Masters
it's
of like
Zulka.
It's Aqua or Zulka. But this card has haste. And I think
even better than Aqua.
That's what made it so insane all weekend was this card really glued together both plans, because when you have your aggressive starts and you're putting the pressure on your opponent, being able to bounce their last blocker and then get in the final bits of damage is unreal, especially for the cheap cost. And when you're on the control plan, playing a very cheap, efficient card that bounces one of their threats and then blocks something on the return is unreal. She really does it all.
When we were testing the control mirror, I found this was the answer to Elk, because
yes,
we felt like whoever got Elk first was really ahead. But this card is able to bounce Elk when they don't have the Armor Dragon established.
And I think that's it. I think this card single-handedly, especially in top 32, because we had open deck lists, this card is the reason I won't play Elk in the mirror until I have Armor up. I think you have to have Armor off, because if you play Elk against this and they just play like another 3-drop, you're not in the ground, but like you have the shovel and the hole's pretty much dug. Like it's pretty hard to come back from those games.
Yeah, we found that in the mirror it was better to go the tempo plan, which is something that our friend Spencer Freeman showed us.
Yep.
Which maybe we'll get an interview with him if we're lucky.
Big shout out. This card also fits into this. So this is where Wes and I's deck diverged. He played Buffalong Bill, which I spent the entire night shouting about Buffalong Bill. I am a certified Buffalong Bill truther. I believe in Buffalong Bill supremacy. He is my boy. And then I went into the tournament and I didn't play Buffalong Bill
because of Austin.
Because
Summers.
Austin, who
our champion, as you guys might know,
is a champion. He's a winner. I knew that going into the tournament, he was probably gonna top 8 easy. I believed he could win. He told me, this card is just cheaper. It bounces immediately. It's more efficient when you're on the aggro game plan. It's better. And I said, A-okay, you're probably right, boss. So I played Fortress God Odin.
Moving forward, would you still play Odin, or would you be on Buffalong Bill?
I think I would probably change around a lot of numbers in this deck. I think the correct number for Buffalong is probably 2 somewhere in the deck, just because it is like a good card, but you really you can't get flooded with them. That's the biggest issue with the deck, is balancing numbers so you don't get flooded with 6 drops and lose the game. But I will say in my top 32 match, this guy almost won me the game because I went down to 1 life. My opponent was at 3 life. He had 3 blockers, and I had 3 attackers. Right, 2 attackers, and I was able to chain together a turn where I played Valkyrie Mist, Fortress God, and it was only possible because of how cheap he does get with reduction. I still lost because his last card was Dream Bomb. We're bitter. We're still bitter, but that's okay. I think this card is still insane. I don't know how you fit both of them, but
let's just say we play 2-1 Buffalong Bill in this.
Yeah, this card was absolutely nuts all weekend. It won me a lot of games in the mirror as well, just because if you can get kind of the foothold when you're on the aggressive plan, they're going to be playing guys that get bounced by Odin to try to stem the bleeding. And once you put them in that position where you're still attacking and now they're just not defending at all, they're dead in the water. Yeah. So Odin was incredibly powerful, but Buffalong Bill is more powerful with his sheer presence. The next card is just Tech Spirit. Purple's our worst matchup, hands down. So we just played main board Ice Maid. I think Austin played 4 in the main board.
Yeah, I think 3 is right.
I think 3 is right. This card is really terrible if you're not playing against Purple.
It's really trash.
Yeah, it's fine. I do think a 3-drop with 2 reduction that for 2 investment can go to 3K is okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. This is a card that you can totally play in the main board, and you're never going to lose games because of it. And when you do play the matchup that is terrible, you might win the game because of it.
Yeah.
That being said, I still lost to Purple because even running these in the main board, I didn't see any game 1. I also didn't see any... what was our other tech card? I think it was just her. Yeah, I didn't see any Ice Maid. And then they comboed me and I died. It was as simple as that. But I would still run 3 of her in the main. I probably wouldn't go to 4. But yeah, she's good. She's fine. Fine body. Does exactly what you need her to. Onto the spells. So we played 3 Suppression. This is the card. Yeah, and Ice Shield. This is the card I probably have the most to say, but I'm gonna say the least about. I would cut it down to 2. This is a card that can win you the game. It's as easy as that. When Wes first played this card against me in testing, I was shrieking. I was yelling because I was like, there's no way it works like that. You can't infinitely block for the turn. There's got to be damage stacking. Your creature has to die eventually. I was wrong. He was right. This, if you play it on a big enough creature, the creature's just unkillable. You get to infinite block. So this is basically
with Elk. It's a Spirit Reaper.
Exactly. Yeah. If you play it on Elk, you gain the first does not die to literally anything trigger on the first block. Suppression. It's Ice Shield 5 through 7.
Yeah.
That being said, I think I only want 2 of this card. I found a lot of ways to use it other than just the infinite block, and the infinite block frequently didn't come up, weirdly. Because most of the time it was just better to Ice Shield, and I had access to both, just because the deck was pretty good at putting cards in your hand. I did have a couple games too where I just played it as a giant growth to kill something, and that was fine. But I also had a lot of games where I had 2 suppressions in my hand and they did nothing and I died.
Yeah, I think I can see 2. It depends on what you think you're gonna play against most. Against decks that you want to block a lot, this is great to main as 3, and then if you want to...
I think preferably it would probably be 4 Ice Shields, 2 Suppression main, and then 1 Suppression in the board. Yeah. I think that's probably the shape I would make. But yeah, this card is insane. It does make people scream, mainly me, but it also has its problems as well. Dream Bomb, this is another iconic white card.
Probably the best card over the weekend, I think.
I think so, yeah. This card won me an insane amount of games. It also lost me an insane amount of games when they had it. It's just really good. I will say it went down a little bit in the weekend just because the meta did shift away from Nexus. So a lot of the games that I played, there just wasn't a Nexus in play. But just like with Valkyrie, a 3-mana just bounce a creature is insane.
I just played it for the bounce effect.
Exactly, yeah. But sometimes you did just get to throw it in your burst zone. They attacked in. I did have it in the white control mirror where like they high rolled. They played turn 1 Nexus, turn 2 Mammoth Graveyard. They attacked me, and I was just like, cool. Dream Bomb, bounce both.
You just lose if that happens.
They got set back 2 turns. Like I'm down a life, but that mana actually mattered, and then I just killed them. Like this card. Unreal. Always play 4 if you're playing white.
Yeah, I think Austin was only playing 3, and I think like this is one of the best cards.
100%.
This is the tempo from this is so good,
and especially like because it's a flash effect. I won so many games, and I lost my game in top 32 just because of the ability to your opponent's like, okay, I've done the math, I've run the numbers. They don't have Ice Shield set. They don't have the mana for Ice Shield. They're only going to have 3 when they go to combat. And then when they swing in with that last guy, you Dream Bomb it with the 3 mana. You couldn't Ice Shield, but you can bounce their last attacker, and suddenly you're winning on the crackback. And that did come up a lot. So this card busted. Absolutely busted. Would not cut any amount. Burning Force, very mixed reviews. I think even in the games where like I was playing against low to the ground decks, killing 2 guys just didn't feel like it mattered a ton. Mainly because you can deal with very wide boards with like PEGACYON and stuff like that without having to spend full 5 mana on stuff. Like you'd rather put stuff to board. I think really the only time this card mattered, and I was happy to have it in the main deck, was against any deck with the big purple Nexus. What is it, Netherworld Castle or something like that?
Yeah.
Whenever anyone taps something, they draw a card. That was an on-site that had to be killed. It did also come up in the yellow matchup for their 4-drop Nexus that draws them a card when something dies and also ramps them.
Yeah, I felt like it was fine. Like I played against yellow aggro, I played against purple aggro, and I played against white aggro, where this card shines. Also just fine in the attack into killing Nexuses.
My issue was like in the white aggro matchup, like they put 2 counters on a Bullet Bill, and like this card just doesn't do anything. And it was the same thing with like the Pterosaur matchup. Like they play the guy that's like a level 3, and they bump their Oviraptor up to like a 4K, and I'm just looking at this like, even if I wanted to spend 5 mana, it didn't do anything. So like, I'd rather just go to the board.
I think this is a fine card to main some copies of, and you can side. I sided out several times.
I sided 3 out so much. I think 2 is probably the correct main board number with 1 in the board.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would do going forward.
Against the white aggro, they went really wide with the mechs, and so like this card ended up being really good.
It is also cool if it lines up where, like, if you are in the white control mirror and they go for the high roll and they turn 1 the Mammoth Graveyard Nexus and then you Destructive Force it, like, you're basically just resetting the game.
Doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good, though. This card frequently felt not good. I think that is my opinion on it. I think it's probably needed, but it felt awful.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I would go down to 2, 1 in the board. I was 3, 1 in the board currently. And then the last card was Star Blast Draw. We felt like the deck needed more draw power. We were playing 4 of this originally. We shaved it down to 3. I think 3 is a good number. I think in the purple and yellow matchups where there's a lot of on summons, setting it down, paying the 4 mana, drawing 4 just puts you really far ahead and probably wins you the game. And the rest of the time when you're kind of like setting up your pillars, you've got your Mammoth already, you've got your armor protection, you're just kind of digging for elk. This card is pivotal. Like, you need this to be able to find your elk to close out the game. 3 is the right number for me, though. I don't think I would want 4, because I did have a lot of games where like I had 2 of these in hand and I'm like, I'm not even casting the first one.
This card was really trash for me because unlike red, we have to pay 4 mana for this, 4 resources, 4 cores. It does not feel good because you just can't play any of the cards that you draw a lot of the times.
Yeah,
that's the big issue. But in the mirror, it's great. So it's fine in the mirror. It's fine in yellow and purple. So
I think it fills a very important role, and you kind of unfortunately have to play it.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, so that's the main deck. That was what I ran with, and it performed really well. I lost 2 matches. That was to purple, which I totally expected, and then in my top 32, because it was single limb, to the white aggro deck, and I just didn't draw Ice Shield game 1 or 3, and I think one Ice Shield either of those games wins it for me. But I'm not bitter. I'm happy, and I'm proud of my run. Anyway.
Nice. Nice.
So onto the sideboard. Cannot speak highly enough about Grey Gamer. I think this card is so unreal. I think we made the correct meta call that white was going to be way more popular than we thought, and this card is insane against white. I think it's probably is it the only card with armor white that's not the big fortress? If there's another one, it's got to be bad.
There might be another one, but I'm not sure.
This is the most efficient one. Having armor red and white, which is great because you can just bring it in the red matchups too, just because you like cheap bodies that like do stuff. And then when it blocks, it gains 2,000 BP at level 2 and 3.
3,000, right?
3,000. Oh my god, this card's even better.
It's even better.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's just a suppression. It suppresses itself, except for all the good parts of suppression. But this card was insane. In all the white matchups I played, I brought in 3. Every time I played it on like turn 2 or 3, my opponent always picked it up, read it, and said, "Oh no, I'm in trouble."
Yeah, I think the key thing for siding is like, again, what we mentioned. What Spencer kind of showed us was like attacking in the mirror is very good. So turn 1, you play PEGACYON, you have it, or I guess if you're going second, you have it on 2 cores. You can swing, and then you can still block their swing back.
Yep.
Grey Gamer.
He's a Grey Gamer. He's
Grey
a gamer
Gamer
just like us.
Is it plays really well because what we do is we take out the 3 Burning Force, put these 3 back in. So now you're up on extra threats.
Cheap threats too, because being with reduction, 2 to play, 1 to sustain is very efficient.
Yeah.
Especially for the stats.
Yeah, so you just have more threats and you can just close out the game really quickly. You have cards that bounce. If they try to, play Elephant, you just Dream Bomb them and they're just dead.
Couldn't recommend this card enough. Honestly, I might have even played a 4th if I could go back in time and do it again. I think this card was so critical in the mirror that there's no reason not to play 4, especially because of how frequently. I think the mirror was my most played matchup of the weekend. I think I played the mirror. So what was it? It was 8 rounds day 1 or 7?
7.
It was 7 rounds day 1 and then 1 round day 2. I played the mirror 5 times.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be more white and red, and I played against not as many. I played against a lot of wacky decks.
Yeah, I played against the mirror 4 times, red twice, yellow once, purple once.
Okay.
This was my answer to purple. It was bad. I thought this card would be really cool. 5 with 2 reduction, 3,000 baseline with very good stats. Like going up to 8,000 is pretty crazy. And when he blocks, he returns all 2 costs to their opponent's hand. So in my mind, because we didn't really have a lot of time to test the yellow matchup, I figured this would put them in a position where they basically couldn't attack because I was most familiar with 2-drop aggro. And in the white control matchup, 2-drop aggro either tries to kill you super fast or they build up to Alice. And if you can get this card down against 2-drops, like, it's really insane. It basically puts them on draw Alice or die. Because the second you block, it bounces the rest of their board. And what are they going to do? Here's the issue. The only yellow deck I played against was the Fabled Beast version, and that deck plays completely different. They play a lot of the 2-drop engine, but they go all the way up to like, the God Beast guy. They have 3 drops. I know he was playing like the Hippocampus to gain life and stuff. He had 4 drops, he had 5 drops, he had 6 drops.
So this card sucked.
This card sucked. It was terrible. I think I think the only 2 yellow decks that top 32'd were both the God Beast version.
Yeah.
So I probably just wouldn't even devote a spot to it to begin with, because I think that matchup is just super winnable with your main board.
I played 2 of the Tigers that Austin played. It was basically armor purple, and then it bounces 2 drops.
Yeah.
But it was a little cheaper.
Yeah.
And the armor purple mattered a lot in purple, against purple. Played against purple aggro, and it was really good.
Yeah. So that would probably be a good replacement for this, or just like more Grey Gamers even. Yeah. I'd probably, like, sideboard I'm less iffy on. I'd probably have to look at the numbers. Countersword, this card's insane. I think every deck, maybe not every deck, but, like, if you're trying to play a mid-range or control plan, I think you should just play a Countersword in the main. Probably 1 main and 1 side. I didn't do that because I'm weak and I'm a coward.
We played Durham Dyna, I think.
We played Durham Dyna instead. That was cool. Our Countersword spot, which was way sicker. But Countersword is just, like, it is the definition of a card that, like, when it's good, it's the best card in your deck, and when it's bad, it's okay.
When you get the Phoenix Wing Wind Blast effect off, it's really
nuts. But even when you're just paying 2 mana to gain a life, like,
okay.
It felt really good. I think if you're in a deck that can't get the full 3 reduction, this card gets really, really bad.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good in white.
Yeah. But yeah, in white, like, I paid 2 to gain a life a lot, and it made the difference basically every time, and it was great. We've talked so much about Burning Force. This would be the 3rd copy instead of the 4th copy. That's the change I would make. Card was disappointing. I thought it was like one of the best cards going into the tournament, and it was just like, it did nothing. I think we had a fundamental misunderstanding of what, like, stats were really going to look like when gameplay happened.
Well, I think what happened was people realized you can't have 3,000 cards. So, what was the yellow card? That minus 3,000?
Oh, Angelic Pressure.
Yeah, so Angelic Pressure and
Burning Force,
Burning Force
you just
3,000.
have to be able to outstat it.
Yeah, so I think the meta shifted so that, like, we realized because the kill spells that are really, really popular and really cheap, kills 3,000s or lower, you can't play those cards. And because people moved away from them, they just subsequently became worse.
Yeah, for sure. Like, stats, I think stats are king coming out of the weekend, and I think their stats are going to be king going forward. I think people realize, like, with the first set and what we all have access to, Absolute Ice Shield is the card that's going to define basically every single one of your games. So you just kind of have to outstat to get through with basically any game plan you're trying.
And what's the last card you got?
Last card is Rocket City. I only brought this card in against purple for the Nexus.
I think it's only good against purple. So
it's basically only good against purple. Yeah. Basically, if they would draw an additional card on their turn, they don't. So this counters the combo. If they have, what is it, Purple Smoke Valley, I think is the one that draws a card whenever you remove kill something by removing a counter.
Yeah.
It also stops when you block while they have Netherworld Castle in play. The one whenever you exhaust, they draw a card. But it's also only during their turn. I think I brought in a couple copies when I played against Red, just because, like, it does neuter their draw effects a little bit. Charge draw. The way this works, by the way, is it looks at an individual action. So if they draw 2 cards with one effect, they only have to discard 1. They don't have to discard every time they draw.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's pretty not great against Red, because they still get to, like, loot 1+1.
I think what I realized was against Red, you kind of are okay if they're playing the looting Nexus, because they're going to deck themselves out and you could just block them.
100%. You're going to win that
this
way
is not so good. This is only good against purple, and that's
Yes.
why I sorry, Austin. I disagree with mainboarding this card, because it's only good against purple.
Yeah.
And especially, like, this is so bad against Red in game 1, just because, like, it's so much core investment. You have to put 2 on this to even get the secondary effect.
I will say, I think what Austin was trying to do with it is just have a cheap Nexus to keep reduction around.
That's
and I think this is the only Nexus in white that fulfills that role.
That's fair.
Because it's 3 with a 1-cost reduction. So if you're playing it exclusively just to, like, as like a mana dork, essentially, I think it fills that role exceptionally well, and it has slight upside.
I do think the plus 1,000 is relevant.
It's good. It's relevant, 100%. But yeah, as far as sideboard, I think you either play this card in the main board as a mana dork, or you don't play it at all. That was my takeaway from the weekend. I do think it does get pretty good against purple if you get multiple down, because then they're drawing 1, discarding 2.
Yeah.
And if you can get 3, that's insane. My purple matchup was just so messed up, though. I didn't draw Rocket Cities. I didn't draw Handmaidens. I don't know how I won the game I won. But purple performed so poorly because I think yellow and red just eat it alive that I don't know
It's interesting because
how worth it is to worry about it outside of the main board cards we're already doing.
Yeah, I heard in the European event, purple did really well, but in North America, it did a lot worse than we thought. We thought purple might have been like the best deck, and then we're playing the deck that counters. Yeah. Or actually, we're playing. Actually, why did we play white?
Because our testing teammate who wanted to be handed a deck wanted to be handed purple.
Oh yes.
So we gave him purple, and
he top 32'd, so
he top 32'd.
You might see him. in the
The top
next
32.
video.
Oh, yeah, there was at least one purple in top 32 because our buddy Chris Nagashi did it. That man is amazing at card games, and I think we probably could have handed him a shuffled assortment of 4-color
We should have given him yellow.
cards, and he probably would have still top 32'd. But he did it with purple, and purple is very much his playstyle in card games in general, so he had a good time, and I was happy doing that for him.
Okay, so that was the deck.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up and let's just, how did you feel about the event? How do you feel about BSS moving forward? You know, we don't even get to play this game until like a month later.
I think that is a downside. I'm itching to play weeklies like already. Like maybe not this week because I'm just so tired from testing and the tournament, but like starting next week, I would be showing up to weeklies every time. I think the game is insanely fun. I think there's a lot of skill in the game that it may not look like it has on kind of a surface glance. And I think there's a lot to do in the game. I think the launch event is not going to be very telling of what the meta will actually look like. I could be completely wrong, but I think a lot of people went with the safest options, which were good stats, good synergies, and kind of like known quantities. And that's why you see a lot of like pterosaurs with like good stats. That's why you saw a lot of like white control, because like those were the obvious strategies with obviously good cards. But I think as people play the game more and more, I think we're gonna see some more experimental decks that get tried and then found out to be really good. And I wouldn't be surprised if honestly this is a format where, you know, in 3 years BSS is a huge success. People look back and they go, oh, you want to play launch event format? Let's build launch event decks. And then
So you would say that this is actually a game that you bought in for the prizing, but
Yes.
you would still play.
Yes, 100%. I'm going to continue playing this game going forward for sure. And I think in 3 years, some YouTuber is going to make a video about how 4-color Michaela was actually the best deck in the format, and we're all idiots for not playing it. It's going to be like Solemn Judgment in Yu-Gi-Oh, where everyone was like, that should have been a 4 of the entire time, and people were just bad. I think that's what this format's going to end up being talked about like, but I can also be wrong, and maybe in 2 months when events are firing and everybody's actually playing the game, we're all just playing Pterosaur. I would like to end the video with that. I am now a Pterosaur main, even though I top 32 with white. I'm a Pterosaur believer. I think the stats are just really good, and I think...
He was going to play it, but he didn't.
I chickened out. Yeah, just after getting my hands on the game and actually playing like a very competitive event against a lot of... Oh, is the video over?